To get into another part of One Last Echo, the idea that men can't write women is silly, and vice versa. This book proves that men can write women just fine because the dynamics between men and women are different between a bunch of female friends, between a bunch of male friends, between parents, between mentors. Male mentors will treat, like other males differently versus treating women differently. It's just a fact. There's no man with boob syndrome in this book at all. Um, the way the characters interconnect with each other is a very from a female perspective. Yeah, he pretty much nailed it in One Last Echo. Uh, how women basically tie themselves together into a unit usually is fashioned in a different way from the guys. I can even pull in a little bit of my own Navy experience with this, but all the guys in our unit, when they were alone together, there, because I also asked my brother these things too, but even from an Army perspective, it's a little bit different. But yeah, when guys are all together, you'll be shooting the shit, talking about all sorts of things. But guess what? Women do the same thing, but with different subjects, different connotations, different focus. So One Last Echo definitely does get this right. Like, if if her parents had had a son rather than a daughter without superpowers, they would have been acting a little bit differently with some regards. Like, they probably still would have been protective, but not so overprotective to the point that they were with their daughter. Because, let's be honest, even taking my own parents into consideration, they're a lot more protective of me than they are of my brother. Even though my brother's the younger one by, like, what, 2 years? But it's just part of our psychology, too. There's just certain things that will be tapped into. So that's what I appreciate about One Last Echo. Also, it feels authentic in the fact that men and women develop differently. They will relate to each other differently, whether they're as friends or confidants or even as a couple. Again, it's just something that I took very big notice of. That and all the surprise cosmic shenanigans later on. I mean, I'm kind of fighting myself to be like, what should I reveal or kind of allude to? But he honestly will make quips about certain things without knocking the reader out of the story. Like, you get the sense that it's not the writer talking about certain subjects; it's these characters. Especially, when it comes to how the ivory tower works, you get the sense that Sarge really keyed into on the fact of how a very young woman just testing out things would react to certain pillars of society, but not in the same way of like, I'm a woman and I'm gonna rebel. It's like no, it's more like not so much that she's rebelling, but more like she's trying to figure out like what's my overall purpose in the world. What am I really doing? So in the grand scheme of things, I would say these characters are a mix of like motivational hero and with a bit of aspirational in there. They definitely aren't flat arc characters. Although certain characters are much more optimistic in nature than others. Some are much more cynical, but he doesn't basically have doom and gloom everywhere, even though the way the opening works. Um, that's why it's going to be fun to see where the rest of the series goes. No matter how many books it is, I'll be on board from when the rest of it pops in. Um, I find that refreshing, especially within superhero prose, because some superhero prose tries too hard to like build like I'm a woman, hear me roar, I don't need nobody, especially no man or something like that. It's like no, One Last Echo setup is refreshing in the fact that it does channel some of that a little bit of that Sailor Moon vibe in the terms of you can tell these women are friends and not like fair weather friends either. They genuinely develop a relationship where they can trust each other kind of like in Sailor Moon or even in Xena and things like that, where you just see this stuff develop over time. You can tell these people will support each other through thick and thin, that sort of thing. And in today's day and age, especially with all these narcissistic, navel gazing asshat of a protagonist, this is like a breath of fresh air, people. Um, I decided with the deep dive stuff also that I'd break things up into smaller chunks so that way I don't ramble as much. I do have a couple more in the pipeline, but like with everything else, I'm like on a constant merry-go-round. I guess teal deer for this part of the deep dive for One Last Echo. Men can write women just fine. It it's just a matter of most times if you're not really familiar how some female relationships work, look I'm not gonna lie, just look at some of the older time kind of what is it, literature, like Jane Austen and things like that. You can get, because honestly, even though the setting around women has changed, the overall psychological networking hasn't. Like that's the reason why I asked my dad and my brother got like some sort of specific guy questions, like how would you react to this or how would you react to that. Not that it goes for all guys, but just so I can get an idea of like, hey, a guy with some sort of military bearing, if they're more traditional, then how would they react to certain situations. That's all there is to it. Have a good day, everybody, and more parts to this deep dive will come up, like as I put together more themes, but I'm also trying to edit myself a little bit so I don't spoil the story much, but just stuff that stood out to me. Have a good day, everybody.